All right, check the mic. We're live talking week 17, instant reaction. Let's start with the game we just saw, basically an island game. Minnesota Vikings get the win over the Green Bay Packers, 27-25. Packers made it a game late, Sam. Vikings controlled most of the game, but look, ended up being a good one. Ended up being what we were expecting, and that gives the Vikings the potential showdown next week with the Detroit Lions. It's definitely a showdown for the Vikings. Lions have to take care of business tomorrow night, and it'll be for the number one seed in the NFC.
Yeah, Vikings keep that number one seed alive. And it was really a replay of the first game between these two teams, where Minnesota was the better team for almost the entirety of the game, and then somehow just refused to absolutely put them away and managed to almost collapse right at the end and escape, like escape with the win that was rightfully theirs for the majority of the game. This was what, 27-10 with 7 minutes left on the clock, and it became a 2-point game where the Vikings needed first downs to avoid giving the ball back to Green Bay and give them a chance to win the game. And okay, we can point to, missed field goal here or there, but it was the same kind of deal. Like the Vikings all the way through the season have just struggled to put away teams. I would love to see like what the totality of the points that they've blown late in games has been, because they've done this a lot. Like the Bears game, they destroyed the Bears and they ended up letting that go to overtime. The last game against Green Bay, a lot of the kind of comeback felt garbage timey, but they got there, like they got it really close. And then this one, where again, 17 points and it almost slipped away.
It is strange how it works, because it's not really garbage. I mean, it's not prevent defense or anything, like the old school. They're literally just sitting back, allowing completions. I don't think Minnesota is doing that necessarily. There was a Sam Darnold interception which originally helped let Green Bay get back into it. But man, I'm still so impressed with Minnesota. They held on. Green Bay did everything they could, including going for two, couple possessions early, which was put them in position for maybe a game-ending field goal if they got the ball back. That field goal before the half was large. How many neutral zone infractions and offsides were called here by officials, including that one right before the half? Green Bay is called for offside. Minnesota misses the field goal. When they retry it, they get the field goal, end up winning by 2. Obviously, that play ends up looking massive at the end of the day here.
And that penalty looked bullshit. Like he was moving. He wasn't in the neutral zone.
There was no way of seeing the helmet in the neutral zone. I don't know what they were looking at, but I do want to rave about Sam Darnold again, though. What an incredible game. One interception in there, which I think was a bit of a force under pressure. But, dude, he does not see – there's not a tight window throw that scares Sam Darnold. Even at the end, when they're running the clock out, it's 2nd and 10, and he's rolling out, and he's just sticking it on Justin Jefferson in a tight window. He does not care. He is fearless. Finishes 33 of 43 for 377, 3 touchdowns in that pick. I just love Darnold's aggressiveness and just overall the way he's playing the game, and another huge game from him with, the season on the line, the number one seed on the line here.
Yeah, and there was that pass to Jefferson, the ridiculous one-handed one as well, that was taken off because of the holding call. Like, he had a couple of utterly ridiculous passes. That last one you mentioned, the crossing route on 2nd and 10 or whatever it was, 2nd and 11. That's a great example of how ball location can be really, really important. Sometimes doesn't matter that much. There's enough separation where if you leave it inside, outside, up, down, doesn't really matter. The guy's going to catch it anyway. This one, the guy covering, was it Ballantyne, covering Jefferson, had grabbed hold of him at least twice by the time the ball actually arrived. Jefferson was working his way back to Darnold, which is the only reason it was caught. But Darnold put that exactly out in front, right in his hands. Anywhere else, there's a pretty good chance that that's getting broken up or is not quite complete. The perfect ball location enables Jefferson to complete the play. And that was a huge, that got most of the way there to then get the next bit with that Cam Akers catch.
So like I said, if Detroit takes care of business tomorrow night, they beat the Niners. It is a battle for the number one seed next week. Reminder, the Week 18 NFL schedule, I think it will probably be announced during Sunday Night Football tonight. That's usually how they do it. I would assume it's going to be Vikings-Lions for Sunday Night Football. Maybe they'll wait until tomorrow after the game, because they usually save the biggest game for Sunday night. Because, again, the way they usually set up Week 18 is 6 or 7 1 o'clocks, 6 or
But
7
it doesn't
4
matter.
o'clocks.
Like, doesn't matter if Detroit loses because they already beat the Vikings. So they either way, that's for the division.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So perfect. I would assume that's going to be Sunday Night Football then. Probably the premier game next week, heading into just to cap off the entire season. Remember, no Thursday Night Football, no Monday Night Football next week. It's all on Sunday, except 2 games on Saturday. So we'll have. I think all that will be announced here tonight. Also, reminder tomorrow morning. Check the Bike live 7 a.m. We'll be going game by game in more depth, of course. Let's go back to the 1 o'clock window here. Buffalo took care of business, 40-14 over the Jets. Really had the Jets shut out. Had the Jets offense scored -2 points with Aaron Rodgers under center. But the Bills moved to 13-3. They're going to be the number 2 seed. They locked that up, and emphatic finish to probably the regular season for Josh Allen with a really nice touchdown pass to Keon Coleman.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen played really well. The Bills bounced back from, relatively underwhelming couple of weeks, and it took a while. It was a bit of a grind earlier in the game, but then once things started to roll their way, it really snowballed, and the Jets were just a complete and total train wreck. Utter disaster. Aaron Rodgers interceptions, Aaron Rodgers penalties for hitting guys late out of bounds. Like, the whole thing just completely fell apart at the seams until eventually it got so far out they just pulled him off the field and put in Tyrod Taylor, who got a couple of garbage time touchdowns. Really impressive from the Bills, who now, secure the 2 seed. They can rest everybody in Week 18. Honestly, the single most interesting thing from the 1 p.m. games to me was all the chaos in terms of draft position. Like, guys winning games that they shouldn't, things setting up so that even next week some of those teams might be able to win games as well. Like, these teams are jockeying to take themselves out of contention for the top of the draft picks.
Well, let's get into that because Buffalo is going to have an impact on the draft next week. As of right now, because of a couple wins here from Jacksonville and from the Raiders, the New England Patriots right now, as of this moment, have the number 1 overall pick. But they're playing Buffalo, who I mentioned has locked up the number 2 seed. If they're going to rest starters, we know Kansas City likes to rest, and they have a bye. Buffalo is playing the following week, almost certainly going to rest their players next week, I would think. So New England has a chance to win a game and maybe lose the number 1 overall pick. But yeah, it's interesting now because the Raiders with their win, we're not going to get into the specific games, Raiders, Saints, or Jags, Titans. But the draft order now with the Titans lost, they're up to number 2. They need a quarterback. Cleveland just lost. They're up to number 3. They need a quarterback probably a year early. The Giants win, and they fall out of the number 1 spot to number 4. They need a quarterback. And then the Raiders, who we've been pegging with, Shedeur Sanders going to the Raiders, they're at number 8 now. They get the number 8 overall pick with their win. So absolute chaos, specifically today when it comes to draft position.
Remember, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the Raiders had a shot at the number 1 pick and could have taken either one of the quarterbacks that they wanted at the top of this draft. We were complaining or sort of saying, look, that was a costly win the last time they won. Now, all of a sudden, you're picking 8, at least as of now, in a draft that might be 2 quarterbacks strong, and they could both be gone 1-2 or 1-3 or something. Like, the Raiders, again, have put themselves in this position where they desperately need a quarterback and have taken themselves like out of range of one, pending obviously trades and anything to jump back up there. But this is like, a couple of years ago, they were sitting there at 7. We're like, there's 4 or 5 quarterbacks. We'll get one. And they didn't. And now they're the same situation. Now they're at 8 at the moment with only 2 quarterbacks potentially available at the top of the draft. So hugely costly for the Raiders institutionally. The Giants, same thing. Like, they were on the way to the number 1 pick and, their pick of Sanders or Cam Ward, whichever one they preferred. And all of a sudden they're in this giant tie now where they don't have the tiebreakers. They've just cost themselves a few spots and moved down.
Yeah, the Giants scored 45 points, Sam. The lowest scoring team in the NFL scores 45 points. There's a kickoff return for a touchdown in there. I mean, it wasn't all offense, but Drew Lock goes 17 of 23 for 309. Malik Neighbors was a huge part of that. 2 touchdowns, 171 receiving yards, creating after the catch. Ever since you said you would take Brian Thomas Jr. over Malik Neighbors after what you had seen, Malik Neighbors reminded us just how special he is as a receiver. So all of a sudden, the Giants, I mean, there's 2 ways of looking at this. The Giants losing that number 1 overall pick, and then the Colts, who in recent history just have this, they've got this history of playoff spot on the line, just laying an egg, right? Week 18 against the Jaguars. And in this particular game, playoff spot potentially on the line, and the Colts defense with their worst performance of the season by far. A lot of interesting implications coming out of this one. Giants move to 3-13. Colts fall to 7-9.
The defense, I mean, the Colts offense without their starting quarterback put up 33 points. I think, Joe Flacco threw for 330 yards, 8.7 yards per attempt. I think we can kind of give the offense a break. But yeah, the defense allowed the Giants offense, which is effectively the worst offense in the NFL this season, to have a dominant outing. Drew Lock threw for 13.4 yards per attempt and had statistically like one of the best games any quarterback has had in years. And that shouldn't have happened. Like, that's a complete inexcusable collapse. Again, like, this is a game where even with, like, if you'd gone into this game and you said, okay, no Richardson, does it make a big difference for this team? Probably not. But you're like, if I could tell you got 33 points out of Joe Flacco without, a catastrophic volume of turnovers, like he didn't throw 5 interceptions as well, you would be like, sweet, we win the game, locked it up, easy, move on, we're into the playoffs. Or the playoffs are alive, rather. Instead, the defense gives up 1 million points to Drew Lock and a bunch of rookies. It's just like a disaster.
It was bad, man. It was you give credit to the offense and everything. That was one of the worst defensive performances I've seen, from the Colts. I thought the Panthers defense, they were outmatched by the Bucs. Give credit to the offense and everything, but just some awful defensive performances across a couple different teams. Anything else draft related before we get to the Bucs Panthers? Because I think that obviously a lot happened this weekend, including, by the way, Shedeur Sanders struggling in his bowl game and Cam Ward playing well in a half and then sitting out, adding all sorts of other drama to the top 2 picks in the draft for next year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much you want to talk about that, but
no, we don't have to. But it was just also happened this weekend.
Right. The Titans, they've kind of done the opposite of the Raiders. Like a few weeks ago, the Titans look like, they weren't hugely well positioned in this draft. Like they're one of those teams that obviously needs a quarterback. They've given up on Will Levis already. Obviously, Mason Rudolph isn't the guy. And Aaron Rodgers is busy dropping hints about how Tennessee's a lovely place to live, on the Pat McAfee show. And you're like, God, they might be in that boat. Like they might be the team that doesn't have a shot at a quarterback and is desperate enough to be like, okay, let's see if Rodgers has one last year in him. All of a sudden, they might back into the number 1 pick. Like if the Patriots win next week because Buffalo's resting all their starters, Tennessee could end up picking number 1 overall, and they have their choice of the quarterbacks.
Yes. I mean, and if New England does end up, by the way, now are the Raiders going to be this place for Aaron Rodgers to go next year because they're going to be, left on the outside looking in? And then if New England ends up with the number 1 pick, if they still lose or if they still end up with number 1, the haul that they could get, not needing a quarterback and being able to trade down, and they might have a chance to reshape their roster, which they need. So look, plenty of offseason to discuss the entire draft as always. Let's talk Bucs. 48-14. Baker Mayfield, 5 touchdowns, 5 incompletions, 27 of 32 for 359 with those 5 TDs. It looked like it could be a shootout early on, but man, when we were talking about this game in the preview show, I didn't realize no Chuba Hubbard, no J.C. Horn. A lot of injuries occurred between Thursday, or injury updates occurred between Thursday and Sunday. Panthers defense just completely outmanned in this one against the Bucs.
Yeah, the defense in particular, like they've been frustrating as a team because, they've had this resurgence with Bryce Young, a quarterback, and occasionally the defense looks the same, as in it has a resurgence as well. It sort of, it plays up to the level of the offense. You're like, okay, Carolina's not that bad. And then a week or two later, the defense goes back to being one like the asterisk defense, like the defense where you have to adjust what happened because, but it's against the Panthers, who are literally not an NFL caliber defense. Okay, injuries are definitely a part of that. But man, they just got absolutely destroyed in this game. Like the run defense was gashed. The pass defense was just a mess. So we were questioning whether the line made any sense for this game. Like they felt like a massive line given how feisty and competitive the Panthers have been, and the Bucs easily covered. I mean, they absolutely annihilated them.
Yeah, Baker still balled out. Mike Evans, he has those games where he is difficult to cover. Bucky Irving was outstanding, 113 yards on the ground, another 77 through the air. So here's what this sets up. The Bucs needed to win this game. They needed to win out. They're watching the Sunday night game closely because the Falcons are still technically in control of the NFC South. If the Falcons win out, they're going to be the NFC South champions. Falcons have to beat the Commanders tonight and then the Panthers next week. If the Falcons lose tonight, it's all on the Bucs next week against the Saints to win the NFC South.
It's crazy that Philadelphia winning today was the first NFC division to be clinched. Nothing else. Like that was the first division that got decided in the NFC. Remember,
the Bills won the East on Thanksgiving or whatever it was.
Right. That's what I mean. Like you factor the AFC, some of these divisions have been wrapped up for like months, and this was the first division in the NFC that had been decided at all. And several of them are still going to be alive going, or multiple ones are going to be still alive going into the last game.
So the other thing to highlight there, remember the Rams needed 3 out of 5. They needed like at least 3 wins out of 5 different games. The last one remaining is this one tonight. So they've got the Commanders tonight against old friends Raheem Morris and Zach Robinson. If the Commanders win, the Rams have the NFC West, or at least a playoff spot, locked up going into Week 18 for them. So that's what they're watching.
The Commanders win, the Rams clinch without having to play the Seahawks.
Yeah. So the Bucs and Rams both rooting for the Commanders pretty hard here tonight. It's going to be an awesome game. Going to be a huge Sunday night football game here. You mentioned the Eagles, 41-7 over the Cowboys. We were trying to paint this picture of all these hilarious things that the Cowboys could do. Didn't matter. Kenny Pickett got the start. Jalen Hurts did not make it out of concussion protocol. Kenny Pickett got the start. Then he got hurt. And look, we had Mike Renner on the show Thursday morning. His guy, Tanner McKee, came in, goes 3 for 4 for 54 yards and 2 touchdowns in this one. And Saquon Barkley goes over 2,000 rushing yards with a $167 on 31 carries.
Yeah, I mean, Pickett was already hurt going into the game. Like, this is why they signed Ian Book as, contingency, because more than one quarterback was hurt going into this. They gave him a shot. He took a shot from Micah Parsons. They thought he could probably go back in if they needed him to, but it's like, we'll give Tanner McKee a go. And Tanner McKee was doing well, so they just left him out there. They were already wrapping it up. Both of them played well, to be honest. Like, Tanner McKee played well in the few passes he attempted, but Kenny Pickett, other than the one play where he inexplicably glitched and did a somersault instead of throwing the ball, other than that play, he delivered a couple of really nice passes, dimes down the field, which is, again, not really his game. Remember, it was the sort of pathologically conservative, no big time throw type of quarterback. 2 or 3 of them in this game where he was firing it downfield to guys like A.J. Brown. He played, both quarterbacks played really well. So for Philadelphia to come out here, absolutely stomp the Cowboys on offense without Jalen Hurts, and without, yes, Saquon Barkley went over 2,000 yards, had his 100 and whatever, but it's not like they didn't lean on him as much as they had leaned on him in other games. I know he had 30 plus carries or whatever, but the passing game fired as well.
Oh, yeah. I thought some of the big plays in the past game, Devontae Smith getting behind, you highlighted Andrew Booth struggling a little bit on the outside for Dallas. Got behind him for a touchdown, got behind him for another one where it should have been a touchdown. Devontae kind of slowed up, got stopped at the 1. It was a big play passing attack from the Eagles. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts wasn't bringing that to the table, but I don't know. They have this in them every single week, which is why I think I'm always high on the Eagles. They have this in them any given week with Devontae, with A.J. Brown, and with all their weapons.
We reach week 17 and 18, and obviously the best indicator of this is when you look at the quarterback matchups and you're like, we've got, Mason Rudolph against Mac Jones and all these kinds of games. But you see the same thing on defense and offense as well as the other positions. And there are guys that end up starting or playing in these week 17 or 18 games that have consistently demonstrated that they do not belong in the NFL. There are players that have no business collecting an NFL paycheck anymore. And yet week 17 or 18 hits, enough guys get hurt. And it's like, call him up. We need him. And Andrew Booth's out there trying to cover people. That guy genuinely might be the worst cornerback in the NFL.
I don't know what happens to the whole narrative. Hey, the Cowboys are playing hard. They're finishing the season strong under Mike McCarthy. They get whooped by the number 2 and 3 quarterbacks from the division rival Eagles here.
But they started fights, so they're still fighting.
Oh, they're still fighting. That's good. That's all that matters. And Big Dom is out there. Big Dom's back in the news, getting that football back. A.J. Brown taking Tanner McKee's first touchdown ball, chucking it into the crowd. Big Dom steps up and goes and gets it for him. It's good to see him getting some spotlight again, but in a positive sense this year.
I was a little disappointed that he wasn't literally wading through the crowd to get it. Like if he'd actually climbed into the stands and had marched his way to the guy and was like, hand it over.
I saw Big Dom. I think I told you last year at the Senior Bowl, standing
Mm.
next to him on the sideline at the Senior Bowl. So hopefully, maybe I'll introduce you because he's, introduce you to my people. Big Dom over there.
You were telling doesn't he have a custom golf cart or something down there?
He had I don't think it was a golf cart. He had a really nice ride. I'll say that. And I mean, just like a power sweatsuit. I mean, the sweatsuit he's bringing to the table, the type of stuff Uncle Anthony, Uncle Ray, my uncles would be really proud of the Italian sweatsuit that he brought to the table down at the Senior Bowl.
Does he drive or does he just have like a better rental agency than we do?
I don't know. I was weighing this in my head. I'm like, where do you get this, high-end Mercedes SUV? Are you renting this down in Mobile? Right. Or are you just driving the whole way? I don't know. We'll have to get to the bottom of it. We're gonna have to get to the bottom of it when we get down there.
Like
you'll have to approach him, and then I got your back.
Dom, I got some questions.
Maybe get you on record.
Maybe it's one of those things where, he doesn't need to drive it. Like somebody low enough on the totem pole gets the short straw of, look, you're driving the Mercedes down to Mobile.
He's the most high-impact security / coach guy in the NFL. I'm just saying. He brings a lot to the table. The last game we have to touch on briefly, Miami Dolphins 20-3 over the Browns. All of the AFC playoff implications. Dolphins are still alive here. So Snoop Huntley comes in. He fills in for Tua. Another injury that we were not aware of on Thursday just showed up yesterday. Tua downgraded to doubtful with a hip injury. Snoop gets the start, and Dolphins get the win. So they're 8-8. And so essentially the Broncos win and they're in for the final wild card spot against the Chiefs, presumably against their backups. If the Broncos lose, Dolphins win and they're in next week against the Jets, I believe it is. And then if the Dolphins lose, then it's on the Bengals. If they beat the Steelers, they're in. So those are the three teams vying for that number 7 seed in the AFC.
Yeah, like a remarkable amount of things that had to break Cincinnati's way have broken Cincinnati's way, but maybe the biggest obstacle to them actually succeeding in this is the fact that the Denvers are playing Carson Wentz and the Chiefs backups.
Yeah.
Now, Carson
and
Wentz
the Dolphins are playing the Jets, the 4-12 Jets, who the heck knows if they can beat them.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, who knows if they have Tua back either. So that at least is still up in the air, but Carson Wentz and the Chiefs backups feels like a team that Denver could take.
The other one that I think we talked about a little bit last night, Bengals Steelers next week. I mean, it's certainly no cakewalk for Cincinnati. I mean, Pittsburgh's been a better team this year, and Pittsburgh wants to win. That number 5 seed is crucial. It is on the line here for the Steelers to go to Houston rather than going, to Baltimore for the first game. So that game means a lot next week. Bengals Steelers.
Yep. No, it does. Like it's not one where the Bengals are not getting a rollover opponent, even if the division team was willing to let it happen. Like they want that seed that they're in because that's the team that goes to Houston as opposed to Baltimore or Buffalo.
Question from Liam in the chat. When do they release the schedule for next week? It is usually during Sunday Night Football. Maybe at halftime. Then maybe they have Kornacki, breaking it all down or whatever he's doing. But I think at halftime of Sunday Night Football, we'll generally get an idea of next week's schedule. Again, usually half the league playing at 1, the other half playing at 4, and then one last game on Sunday Night Football. Next week at this time, though, you and I are going to be in Vegas. We're going to be out there at Circa, hanging out, watching all the games all day. And then I think we'll probably do an instant reaction. And then our big show is going to be on Sunday night, not Monday morning next week. So be ready. Next week, week 18, will be an instant reaction, but the long form style. After Sunday Night Football, we'll do the whole 2.5 hours or whatever it is, recap everything from week 18 live from Circa.
Yeah, Sunday night Vegas time, though, so it's probably going to be early morning for most people anyway.
Yeah, well, we'll be ready to go. So anyway, appreciate everybody as always. The full breakdown is tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. sharp, right here on YouTube. Check the mic, hit the thumbs up, do the subscribe thing. We appreciate all the new subscribers. Welcome to the channel, and enjoy Sunday Night Football. We'll see you again tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Check the mic.